Do you know who the most successful franchises in Major League Baseball history are? You might be a little surprised to find out who's at the top and who's at the bottom. Stick with me and let's rank all 30 teams. What is going on, everybody? Thanks for joining me on my channel, Brutus on Baseball. Today's video is a ranking of all 30 baseball teams based on their historical success. The idea for this video came last fall when we were watching the World Series in my family, and I was trying to explain to my kids the idea of historical context for franchise success. Some of the worst teams right now in the game are actually some of the best teams historically, and vice versa. So I wanted to make this video as kind of a marker to put out there that my kids could watch to understand the history of Major League Baseball and who the teams have been that have taken advantage of the most opportunities and the teams that haven't even managed to figure out how to get those opportunities. It's easy to find this information, but there's no place that you can find it all in one spot very easily. So I figured I'd do a video to run down from 1 to 30 the most successful teams in Major League Baseball history. I think a lot of people might know who's at the number 1 spot and who's way down at the bottom, but it's a big jumbled mess who's actually in the middle and what the pecking order really is. So I've tried to put it into some sort of context to be able to share with you guys today. Now we're going to start at number 30, and at the beginning of the list there's a lot of teams all jumbled in there. So I tried to order them based on how long they've been around or how many chances they've actually had at the World Series. Now keep in mind, this isn't about how many games that they've won in the history. This is about how many championships they've brought home. And starting at the number 30, there's a big hint right here. It's the Seattle Mariners. I've ranked Seattle number 30 because they are the only team that's never actually been to the World Series. So their chances, they're 0 for 0. You've never had an opportunity. They've been around since 1977, and so that means it's been 46 seasons through last year that they have never even appeared in the World Series. The last column here I'm going to save for how the team is actually looking right now and what their chances are of winning a World Series. And there's a whole scale here from ugly to excellent, and I've put the Mariners at decent. They've got a decent shot at making it, but definitely not an excellent shot. The team really needs to do a lot more to bring in some top talent to be able to make that ranking on my list. The number 29 team is actually tied to Seattle as well, the Seattle Pilots, who became the Milwaukee Brewers in 1969. The Brewers are 0 for 1. They've had one opportunity in the World Series and they lost in 1982. So they've actually been longer than the Mariners, 54 years without a championship, but at least they had that opportunity back when Robin Yount and Paul Molitor were young players. Their chances right now, I would have put them decent until that Corbin Burnes trade. Now they're just meh to me. Not that great, not that bad either. The number 28 slot I've reserved for the Colorado Rockies. They're 0 for 1 as well, with their only World Series appearance being in 2007. They've been around since 1993, which means that they've hit the 3-decade mark without winning a World Championship. But the reason I've ranked them at 28 and below a couple other teams that have never won the World Series is because their chances looking forward right now are pretty ugly. I don't think they have much of an opportunity to make the World Series anytime soon. Now there's 2 more teams ranked at the bottom because they've never won the World Series before. Number 27 is the San Diego Padres. They're 0 for 2 in World Series history, making the World Series in both 1984 and 1998. They've been a team since 1969, so it means just like the Brewers, they've had 54 seasons without a World Series championship. But I've ranked them a few spots higher because they've made 2 World Series at least, and their chances right now I've put at decent. They've got a pretty good core team, and I wouldn't be surprised, even with the subtraction of Juan Soto, if they can get some more key players to fill roster positions so that they're not so heavy at the top but stronger throughout, they might actually be a better team overall. And the last team, ranked 26th, also never won the World Series, is the Tampa Bay Rays. They're 0 for 2 in their short existence, making the World Series in both 2008 and 2020. But they've been around since 1998, which means 25 seasons with no World Series yet. But their chances, I rank them as excellent. They're always going through roster changes, trading off their guys about to be free agents and make a lot more money, and bringing in young talent, but they seem to always be able to put together really strong teams. All right, starting with the number 25 team, we're now out of the cellar and on to teams that have won World Series. But again, there's a number of teams that have only won one World Series in the history of their franchise. Number 25, I've put the Anaheim Angels, or the Los Angeles Angels of of Anaheim or California Angels, whatever name that they've been known by in the past. They're 1-for-1 in World Series history. Their only World Series in 2002 when they beat the San Francisco Giants. They've been a franchise since 1961, so they have been around for quite a while, but it's only been 21 years since their last championship. But the reason why they're at the bottom of all the teams that have won one is because their outlook right now is pretty poor. They still have Mike Trout, but it looks like it's starting to be the downside of his career rather than the peak anymore, and they lost Shohei Ohtani. Outside of Trout, they just don't have a whole lot to build around except for a few young players that we'll have to still wait and see how they turn out. Number 24 is the Washington Nationals, who also extend back to the Montreal Expos. They're 1-for-1 in their World Series history as well, winning in 2019 as the Nationals. But the Expos never made the World Series, going back all the way to when they first became a team in 1969. And since they won in 2019, it's only been 4 years since they actually won their last World Championship. But their outlook right now is pretty poor. They're definitely a rebuilding team. If you check back in 2 or 3 years from now, they may actually increase their chances to meh or decent, but for right now, they're just not there yet. The number 23 team is the Arizona Diamondbacks. They're 1-for-2 in World Series history, winning it in 2001 and of course losing it this last year to the Texas Rangers. They became a franchise in 1998, but since they won in 2001, it's only been 22 seasons since the last World Championship. And their chances right now are excellent. I love this young Diamondbacks team, a core of really great players that they've surrounded with some really key veterans this last offseason. I wouldn't be surprised to actually see them challenge the Dodgers, even though they spent way less money. And the number 22 franchise is the best of all the franchises that have only won one World Series, and that's the Texas Rangers, who just won in 2023 for the first time in history. They have been around since 1961 as either the Washington Senators or the Texas Rangers starting in the early 70s. But it's been 0 years since their last World Championship, and they have an excellent outlook to be able to repeat either this year or in coming years. So that's why they're at the top of the one championship teams to me. All right, now we're moving into the teams that have won 2 World Championships. Number 21 is the Cleveland Guardians. In World Series history, they're 2-for-6, so they've won twice and they've lost 4 times. Their 2 wins are a long time ago, though. In 1920 and 1948 was their last one. And they've been around since 1901, so it's been 75 years since they last won the World Series. Their chances right now are meh. Sometimes they can be great, sometimes they can just stagger and not do a whole lot. But they've got some great players to build around, so they definitely have a shot. The next team is the New York Mets. They've won twice out of 5 chances, with their wins being in 1969 with the Miracle Mets and 1986 with another team that may as well have been called the Miracle Mets when they beat the Red Sox in the World Series. They've been a team since 1962, and so it's great that they've been able to win 2 compared to some of the other teams lower on the list, but it has been 37 seasons since their last championship. And I rate their prospects right now as meh. They kind of entered into mini rebuild mode last year, and they didn't add a whole lot in this offseason, even though they tried. So in 2024, I don't think their chances are that great of making the playoffs, but you never know. They might come together, but probably not. The next team I actually was going to rate below the Mets, but I'm going to put them at number 19 just because their chances are better of getting a championship sometime sooner, and that's the rival Philadelphia Phillies. The Phillies have actually been around for a very long time, starting in 1883, and they're only 2-for-8 in World Series history, 2 wins and 6 losses. But their wins have been somewhat recent in 1980 and 2008. So just looking at the numbers, I should have ranked them a little bit below the Mets. But to me, they have an excellent shot at getting a World Series sometime soon, especially when that team turns it on in October with Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, JT Realmuto, and a solid pitching staff behind Wheeler and Nola. And sometimes you just have to look at the intangibles as well. The Mets just fall apart when the pressure's on, whereas the Phillies seem to come together recently and really turn on the afterburners. So the Phillies have made a lot more World Series but lost them, but I think that overall I would put them as the more successful franchise of the 2. Number 18 on my list is the Kansas City Royals, one of the worst teams in recent years, but actually not too bad in history. They've made 4 World Series and won 2 of them, so they're 2-for-4, with wins in 1985 and 2015, so only 8 years since the last World Championship. They've been around as a team since 1969, so making 4 World Series in that time is actually pretty good. And I put their chances right now as poor, because I just don't think they have the nucleus that they need. They spent a little bit in free agents. I think they're going to have a more solid team, and they locked Bobby Witt up to a long-term contract, which was key for this team. But I just don't see him putting it together yet. Give them another season or two to really start gelling with a young team, and they might turn around their chances to even decent, but just not right now when I'm making this video. The next team with 2 World Series championships is the Toronto Blue Jays, who have gone 2 for 2 with wins in 1992 and 1993. They've been a team since 1977, so they actually haven't been around all that long. But it's been 30 seasons since the last World Championship. But I put them up here about the middle of the pack for the 2-win teams because their chances of winning right now are pretty decent. They've got a young core, but not too young, actually have quite a bit of experience. And they've been underperforming the last few seasons in my mind. It's a tough division to compete against the Yankees, Orioles, and Rays now, but they still have a decent chance of making the playoffs and going on a run when they get there. The next team up, I don't rank them as high as a good team right now, but because they haven't been around for that long and they've won 2, I had to put them above all the other teams, and that's the Miami Marlins. They've made it to 2 World Series as the Florida Marlins in 1997 and 2003 and won both of those times. They've only been a team since 1993, so they won their first World Series only 4 years in. But it has been 20 seasons and a lot of misguided management at the top since they last won the World Series. And in my mind, they're a pretty good team, but to me the chances of them winning are still pretty poor, especially with losing Sandy Alcantara for another season. But because they have 2 wins already as such a young team, I had to put them somewhere toward the top of this list of 2-win teams. And the last team with 2 World Series championships, coming in at number 15 and the halfway point for Major League franchises, is the Houston Astros. I put them at the top of the 2-win teams because of all of their recent success and how good of a core they still have right now. But they're 2 for 5 in the history of World Series, winning in 2017 and 2022. They've been around since 1962, but it's only been 1 season since their last World Championship, and they have an excellent outlook at being able to reach the World Series and possibly win again in the coming seasons. All right, now we're in the top half of the most successful franchises in Major League Baseball. And I struggled with who to put at number 13 and who to put at number 14 between the 2 Chicago teams. But I've decided number 14 is the White Sox, with 3 World Series wins out of 5 chances. They won in 1906, 1917, and then they had the debacle of the Black Sox scandal and didn't win again until 2004. So it was a very long stretch with no championships for that team. They've been around since 1901, and it's only been 19 seasons since their last championship. But right now, their chances of winning another one, in my mind, are ugly, which is a key factor in why they placed 1 spot down from the number 13 team, the Chicago Cubs. Now, the Chicago Cubs have also won 3 championships, but 12 opportunities, which means they lost a lot of World Series, but it also means that they reached 7 more World Series than those White Sox did. Just like the White Sox, the Cubs won a long time ago in 1907 and 1908 and didn't win again until 2016. And they've been a team in one form or another since 1870. But it's only been 7 seasons since their last World Series championship, and their chances right now of winning again are somewhere between meh and decent, especially if they're able to invest in another free agent before the start of this season. So when I had to pick between the White Sox and Cubs, 2 teams that have won 3 World Series each, I had to look at the Cubs' longer history of making the World Series, their more recent World Series win, and their better chances of winning another World Series sooner than the White Sox. The number 12 team is another team that has 3 World Series wins in their history, and that is the Minnesota Twins, and going back further, the Washington Senators. They're 3 for 6 in World Series appearances, so 3 wins and 3 losses, with those wins coming in 1924 as the Senators, and 1987 and 1991 as the Minnesota Twins. As a team, they've been around since 1901, but it has been 32 seasons since their last World Series victory. And their chances right now I rate incredibly close to the Cubs as well, from meh to decent, because they've got a good core of players, but they just don't do a whole lot to bring in new guys on the free agent market. In a weak Central Division, they really should be doing more to be able to run away with it easily. But that's one of the questions of the new bargaining agreement that they've made with the players. With so many teams making the playoffs, the Twins might be able to sit back a little bit more, spend less money, but still make it into the playoffs, which is kind of questionable if that's good for baseball or not. And the last of the 3-win teams, ranked at number 11, is the Baltimore Orioles, and going back before that, the St. Louis Browns. The Browns-Orioles teams are 3 for 7 in World Series history, so 3 wins and 4 losses, with those wins all coming as the Orioles in 1966, 1970, and 1983. They've been a team since 1901, but it has been 40 seasons since their last World Series championship. But they're ranked at the top of the 3-win teams because their outlook right now is absolutely excellent. In my mind, actually one of the best outlooks of all of baseball, because of the young core of talent that they have that's under contract at pretty small prices for the next several seasons, plus their ability to be able to add free agents and guys in trades like Corbin Burnes that they just added. Add on new team ownership, and I imagine that they're going to be spending even more to compete with the Yankees, Red Sox, Blue Jays, and Rays and come out on top often over the next number of seasons. All right, we officially entered the top 10 franchises in baseball history now. And there's 2 teams that officially have 4 World Series championships under the belt. But for me, the number 10 team is the Detroit Tigers, who happen to actually be my favorite team. But I had to put them here because they have less history than the number 9 team on the list. The Tigers are 4 for 11 in World Series history, so 4 wins and 7 losses, with those wins coming in 1935, 1945, 1968, and 1984 was the last one. They've been a franchise since 1901, but it's been 39 seasons since their last championship. And they've had some really difficult times ever since those mid-1980s teams. Their outlook right now, I'd still rank as poor, like the Royals and Nationals, who are pretty young right now and could change their outlook pretty quickly in the next year or two. But for now, it's still pretty poor to me. And the number 9 team is the Atlanta Braves, who have also won 4 World Series out of 10 opportunities. The Braves have existed for a very long time, going back to 1870 as various versions of the Boston Red Stockings, Boston Doves, and eventually becoming the Boston Braves, Milwaukee Braves, and Atlanta Braves. So they have had a lot of opportunity to make the World Series, but they didn't win on a regular basis until becoming the Atlanta Braves. Their World Series wins came one as the Boston Braves in 1914, one as the Milwaukee Braves in 1957, and then 2 since being the Atlanta Braves in 1995 and 2021. So it's only been 2 seasons since their last World Championship. But their outlook right now surrounding that core talent of Acuna, Albies, Strider, and Austin Riley is excellent as well. I put it up there with the Orioles as one of the best teams in baseball. And the reason why I put them ahead of the Tigers is because technically they also won a championship in 1892 when they were still in Boston. It wasn't really a World Series at that time, but it was the 2 best teams from 2 different leagues that existed at that time that did play in sort of a championship series. The Boston team that would become the Braves won, and so that puts them a little hair ahead. Still 4 World Series championships, but 5 championships in team history. Now we've got teams with 5 championships in franchise history. And this was a tough one to figure out who to rank number 7 and who to rank number 8. But at number 8, I've put the Cincinnati Reds, who were 5 wins and 4 losses in World Series history, so 5 for 9. Their wins came in 1919, 1940, 1975 and 76 with the Big Red Machine, and then 1990 with the Nasty Boys. They've been a franchise since 1882, and it's been 33 seasons since their last World Series. And their chances right now, I'd actually put them at decent. They haven't been a great team lately, and if you asked me last year, I probably would have put poor. But they have such a young core of talent that's coming up that if you give it another year or two, I think that they're going to look very similar to the Baltimore Orioles. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm actually a little bit hesitating that I put them at number 8 instead of number 7. But we're just going to go with it because we love controversy, right? Number 7 on the list, is the Pittsburgh Pirates, one of the worst teams in the last few decades of baseball. But if you look historically, they've got 5 World Series championships out of 7 tries. So only 2 losses, which is why I did rank them ahead of the Reds to begin with. 2 losses in the World Series instead of 4. But their wins came in 1909, 1925, 1960 with the shot heard around the world, 1971, and the 1979 season was the last time with the We Are Family team. They've been a team since 1882 as well, matching the Cincinnati Reds, but it's been 44 seasons since the last World Championship, and their outlook right now is still pretty poor in my mind. But deciding where to rank them, I chose a fewer World Series wins over current outlook for the Reds. Sorry, Reds fans. Okay, now we've got the number 6 team. It's the Los Angeles Dodgers. Going back in the day to the Brooklyn Dodgers or the Brooklyn Superbas or Robins. They've got 7 World Series championships out of 21 tries, so double the amount of losses than wins. It took them a long time to win their first one, but they won in 1955, 1959, 63, 65 behind Koufax, Drysdale, and then in 1981, 1988 behind Kirk Gibson, and of course the shortened season of 2020. They've been a team since 1884, but it's only been 3 seasons since the last World Championship, and their outlook right now is also excellent. Obviously, to anybody paying attention in baseball today would know that. And I'll add in that they did win a championship again in 1900 before the World Series officially began in 1903. So we'll give them that little bit of extra credit. Now, coming into the top 5, Dodger fans will hate this, but just ahead of the Dodgers is number 5, the San Francisco Giants, who have won 8 World Series championships out of 20 tries, so only 12 losses compared to the Dodgers' 14. But they've won throughout their history fairly well. 1905, 1921, 22, 1933, 1954, and then the 3 in 2010, 2012, and 2014 behind Buster Posey and Madison Bumgarner. They've been a team since 1883 when they were the New York Giants, but it's only been 9 seasons since their last World Championship. But their outlook to me right now is meh. I'm not that excited about this team, even though they always seem to hover in contention. But I will say that for the Dodgers extra credit for winning in 1900, the New York Giants won in 1888 and 1889, the version of the World Series that existed at that time. So 2 little bits of extra credit for the Giants to keep them a step ahead of the Dodgers. The number 4 team, I think a lot of people will be surprised about because the team has been through so much turmoil recently, and that is the Oakland Athletics. Extending back to the Kansas City Athletics, where they didn't have a lot of success, but even further, the Philadelphia Athletics, where they had a ton of success. They won 9 World Series championships in team history out of 14 tries, so only 5 losses. But they won in 1910, 1911, and 1913 behind the $1 million infield, 1929 and 30, and then 1972, 73, and 74 behind a great team that featured Catfish Hunter, Sal Bando, Bert Campaneris, and Reggie Jackson, among many others. And then most recently they won in 1989. The famous Bay Area Earthquake World Series behind the Bash brothers, Mark McGwire and Jose Canseco. They were established as a team in 1901, but it's been 34 seasons since their last World Series, and the chances of adding to it anytime soon are pretty ugly. But we'll have to see how that all plays out with the move to Las Vegas or not. Now for the top 3 teams in terms of franchise success in the history of baseball. The number 3 team is the Boston Red Sox, who are 9 wins out of 13 chances for the World Series, so only 4 losses. And their story is an unusual one, winning a lot early as the various Boston teams that they played as before they became the Red Sox. They won in 1903, 1912, 1915, 1916, and 1918. So a lot of wins early on. And then they didn't win anywhere at all between 1918 and 2004. Of course, losing in heartbreaking fashion to the Reds in 1975 and to the Mets in 1986. But since 2004, they've won in 2004, 2007, 2013, and 2018. So those 4 wins in recent history have propelled them way past the Reds, the Pirates, the Dodgers, and the Giants to tie the Athletics with 9 World Series championships in history of the team. They've been around since 1901, but it's only been 5 years since their last championship, which to Red Sox fans probably seems a lot longer than that. Their chances right now, I'd put them around meh, but they're a team that could really turn it on when they want to. They just need to be able to develop their talent, sign their young talent to long-term contracts. They have the opportunity to bring in more players, more free agents to really compete, which is something they haven't done recently. The number 2 most successful franchise in big league history is the St. Louis Cardinals, who extended back as the St. Louis Browns into the 1800s before the other St. Louis Browns became a major league team in 1902. But the Cardinals have a lot of history of success in the World Series, winning 11 championships out of 19, so only losing 8. They won during the live ball era in 1926, 1931, 1934. They took advantage of the weakened major league system during World War II and won in 1942, 1944, and then in 1946, and then added on some more championships in 1964, 1967, 1982, and finally 2006 and 2011. They've been a franchise since 1882, and it's only been 12 seasons since their last World Series championship. Their outlook right now, I would put it somewhere between meh and decent, because I can never seem to count the Cardinals out. Even when I think they're going to have a down year, they seem to find some really young guys to turn it on and play great baseball. So I'm hard-pressed to put their chances anything less than decent, no matter what their 2023 looked like. And to give them a little bit extra credit, they did win a championship in 1886, but they did lose in 1885, 1887, and 1888 as well. So we'll give them a little bit of extra credit, but then we'll take it away for losing 3 around that 1 victory. And to not many people's surprise, the number 1 franchise in Major League history is the New York Yankees. They've been around since 1903 as the New York Yankees, and before that, the New York Highlanders. But they've won 27 World Series out of 40 opportunities in the history of that franchise. So winning 27 and losing only 13. There's a lot of years here. I'll let you look at it, but they had some during the Murderers Row with Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, 23, 27, 28, 32, 36 to 39. DiMaggio comes in, 41, 43, 47, 49 to 53. When Mantle comes into the picture, they win more in 56, 58, 61, 62. Tons of championships during that time between the late 30s and early 60s. And then they had a bit of a break until they really came together as a team again in 1977, 78, behind Reggie Jackson, Rod Guidry, those guys. And then they won, of course, in 1996, 98, 99, and 2000 behind Derek Jeter, Mariano Rivera, Jorge Posada. And then eventually they won again in 2009 behind an old Derek Jeter and Alex Rodriguez. The problem for Yankee fans, though, is it's been 14 seasons since their last World Series championship, which for the Yankees is a very long time. If you discount their first 20 years of existence when they didn't win a World Championship, the only amount of time that matches their current drought is 1962 to 1977. There were 14 seasons of losing before they won again. And then 1978 to 1996, that was their longest drought, reaching 18 seasons before winning. So we're starting to get close to the longest drought in Yankees history before winning a World Series. I do put their current outlook at pretty decent, but there's a lot of teams in that American League East that either are decent or excellent in their outlooks. So the Yankees still are going to have a really tough time making it to the cream of the crop in that division. I personally have never liked the Yankees. I'm one of those guys that roots against them no matter who they're playing, but you cannot deny that they are by far the cream of the crop in terms of franchise history success in Major League Baseball. So there you go. Major League Baseball teams ranked from 30 all the way to number 1 in terms of historical franchise history of winning. Be sure to share it with anybody you think would enjoy knowing this information, who might be surprised where their team ranks. Your kids may be surprised to find out that the Athletics and the Pirates are ranked so high in terms of historical franchise success compared to what they've seen in recent years. And sometimes it's good to remember that historical context so we can continue rooting for these teams. Thanks again for joining me. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share with anybody who's going to enjoy this video. In the meantime, keep talking baseball, take care of yourself, and we'll see you around.